Robert Antoni is with us, a novelist with close associations with Miami, back for a visit with his new novel, As Flies to Whatless Boys. Explain that title to us, Bob.
It comes from a quote from King Lear. As flies to wanton boys are we to the gods, they kill us for their sport. And whatless is a Trinidad colloquialism that means worthless, useless, basically without what. And I'm cluing in the reader to the fact that I'll be using lots of Trini vernacular in the novel.
And this novel is inspired by your family's experience?
Yeah, I learned most of it through my research, but what I discovered is that my family on my mother's side originally immigrated from London to Trinidad in 1845 as part of a bizarre and wonderful tropical immigration society run by a German inventor, visionary, and charlatan by the name of John Adolphus Etzler. And he claimed to have invented machines powered by the immense forces of Mother Nature that would basically transform the tropics into an English garden virtually overnight. And my mother's family were among his first group of pioneers.
But they were disappointed, weren't they?
Yeah, immediately upon arriving in Trinidad, my family patriarch and his 15-year-old son settled the family, and the two of them left with the men of the society, and they went to a hastily purchased estate in the most remote part of Trinidad's north coast, basically called Chaguabariga, or Belly of Mud, and the pioneers never even got a chance to unpack Etzler's satellite, the machine that would have drained the swamp and planted their first crops. Within weeks, the majority of them, including my family patriarch, were stricken with what they called the dreaded black vomit, which is probably yellow fever and dysentery and malaria and whatever else you could get in the jungle with nothing but a small box of homeopathic pills. And the narrator of my novel is my patriarch's 15-year-old son, Willie Tucker. And Willie realizes that the only way to get his father out of the jungle and back home to his family and medical attention in Port of Spain is to transport him there on a stretcher, makeshift stretcher, carried by himself, an African, and two Warahoon Indians. So for a day and a night, the four of them haul him over the mountains of the northern range, basically across the breadth of Trinidad, back home to his family, only to spend his final few hours with them. I mean, that's the sort of the tragic, epic Shakespearean moment in the novel. But there's lots of other stuff. There's a romance. Willie falls in love on the ship going over, and there's this family story, but it's also very much a coming-of-age story.
Was this inspired by family stories that came handed down?
Well, really the only story my mother had was that, immediately upon arriving in Trinidad, the first Tucker and his son set off into the jungle. She had no idea where they went or why, except that the son had brought his father back 6 weeks later, dying. And you know, when I first came across this story, it was in an old memoir, Trinidadian memoir, talking about Etzler, and there was a footnote to the short passage on Etzler saying that several well-known Trinidad families were established in Trinidad due to his experiment, and among them was my family surname, Tucker. And so I went to my mother and said, what's this? What's the Tropical Immigration Society? Who's Etzler? She had no idea, but I figured that if they were part of the story, then if they were part of of Etzler's society, then the story she had made sense. And I basically started researching Etzler until I came across the name Tucker. And I found that they were indeed very much involved.
How much detail were you able to find from research, and how much did you make up as you wrote? You know?
Well, I had tons of stuff on Etzler. I spent years researching him. He had several treatises all about these crazy machines and mechanical drawings, and which I absolutely loved, but almost nothing on my own family, a few minor details. And eventually I realized that I didn't want to tell the history of Etzler. I wanted to tell a small, intimate family story. So I, in a sense, had to shove all of that Etzler stuff off my desk and start to invent from scratch. Yeah. But the whole bulk of Etzler was there, and he certainly, is a major player in the novel.
Yeah. Bob, tell us about your background. How it is that you're a Miami person, and you're also a Caribbean.
Yeah. Well, I belong to all sorts of places. I lived here in Miami for 10 years. Taught at the University of Miami. And I grew up in the Bahamas, 150 miles away from here. But my family is from the island of Trinidad and Tobago, the islands of Trinidad and Tobago, and we have a couple hundred years of family history on both sides there. And so from the beginning, Trinidad has really been the inspiration for my writing. A lot of the Bahamas comes through, but it's really Trinidad.
How does this book fit in with the books that came before? I mean, are they of a piece? I mean,
yeah.
As you know, I greatly admire the book, my grandmother's erotic folktales.
Yeah.
I love that book.
Well, my focus is always language. I write in West Indian vernaculars. And I always manage somehow to mix a lot of comedy into whatever I'm doing. This is a tragic story, but there's lots of rollicking, good fun. Lots of play with language. So in that, every book for me is a new project. And I've never written a historical novel per se, but certainly all of my preoccupations with language are paramount.
Yeah, you taught at UM for several years. Are you teaching anywhere now?
I'm teaching at the New School University in Manhattan. I've been there for 8 or 9 years. I'm in the MFA program there, and I just love it. Always wanted to live in Manhattan and to be able to live in Chelsea and walk a few blocks to teach my classes is a real privilege.
That's great. Robert Antoni, the new book is As Flies to Whatless Boys. Thank you so much for being with us.
Chauncey, it's great.